Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name's Simon Timperley from the International Food Safety and Quality Network. Welcome to Food Safety Fridays, edition 125. Today, we'll be joined by Jennifer McCreary, Technical Manager Training and Education from NSF International. And the presentation today is Training at the Moment of Need. I hope you can see that message at the top of the sidebar. It is being recorded today, and we'll follow up with an email to all registrants afterwards with the recording, the slides, certificate of attendance, etc. Yes, type in the sidebar, say hello, tell us where you're joining us from today, and try and save your questions till the end. But yeah, just say hello and get to know each other in the sidebar. Food Safety Fridays, as regulars may know, is sponsored, and I'm now going to play the sponsor ads. After that, we'll be heading over to Jennifer to say a quick hello before the presentation. I'll be back in 2 minutes.
The world of food has changed a lot in the last 100 years. But one thing that doesn't change? Ensuring the quality and safe handling of food. No matter what changes are yet to come, we're proud to always be on our clients' side, shaping the future of food, today and tomorrow. AIB International, ever onward.
Okay, thanks to the sponsors there. Are you there, Jen? If you can switch your webcam on. Yes.
There I am.
Good morning, Jen. How are you?
I'm very good, Simon. Thank you. Good day to everybody on the line. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are.
And where are you, Jen? Tell the audience where you are.
I am in Toronto, Canada. So it's a bright, sunny day out there today. So we're looking forward to enjoying it on the weekend.
Super, aren't we all? But first, your important presentation. So I'll just get that up. If you can switch your webcam off, I will do too. I'll be back for the Q&A later.
Okay. Good morning. As I say, good day, everyone. I'd like to thank Simon and IFSQN for this opportunity to speak with you today. I'm looking forward to it. I've had the opportunity in the past, so hopefully we'll have as good a time today as we have previously. A bit of background in case you're not familiar with NSF International. We're celebrating our 75th anniversary this year. We're a globally recognized health and public safety organization, and you probably recognize us, maybe more that you've had one of our auditors into your facility. We're one of the largest certification bodies internationally, as well as being involved in training. That I work with the training group globally, as well as consulting. And one of the things that's near and dear to my heart is training, and that's what I'm speaking about today. To go through. And what we're going to be looking at is kind of maybe a bit of a change to how we've thought about it. Is I'm going to be talking about the 5 moments of training needs, or maybe more appropriately, learner needs with respect to gaining of information. Historically, we prepared our training programs that, we knew that we had to have training to meet our GFSI requirements, our customer requirements, etc. But we prepared the training material, we prepared the training programs and our schedules maybe more to suit our needs as trainers or QA managers or production schedules. So for example, we have a downtime and we have somebody, the operations manager says, let's do the training at that point. And, but I'm going to look at, is that really the best method for learners? Is that really the best timing for learners? And so I'm going to talk about the 5 moments of training needs. So the first one is learning the first time. And so an example of this would be when we, first onboard someone. We have somebody new starting, and so we have to go through and we have to teach them GMPs, good manufacturing practices or good agricultural practices as need be. So they're going through and learning that information for the first time. Our second moment of training is expanding our knowledge. To go through. So an example of this may be that one of those individuals who went through, the operator who learned GMPs during the first moment of need, this time they've now been selected for our HACCP team. And so we're expanding that knowledge. They already have some food safety knowledge, but we're expanding it because they're going on to the HACCP team. So now they need to understand, okay, maybe more about what types of hazards, what are those hazards, how do we do a hazard analysis. So we're building on what we had previously. And this is really one of the easiest because there's comfort there that we've already got some knowledge and we're just expanding it. We're learning more. Another example that could be of expanding knowledge is an operator at a CCP. They've had the GMP training. Now they've been selected to do CCP monitoring. So they need to know, okay, what are the limits? How do I do that monitoring to carry out? How do I record it? Our third moment of need for training is now when we take that information that we learned through our GMPs, if we're going on to the HACCP team to looking at that, is now our third moment of need is when we actually have to start applying that knowledge, is that we're acting on it. So that for our HACCP team member, the example here is now they're working as part of that team to carry out the hazard analysis. So they're actually actively involved in that activity that's there. They've taken their knowledge and they're working with it. For the operator working at a CCP, they've now taken that training that they've learned how to, what were the critical limits, what was the hazard that was involved with it, monitoring it, and now they're actually at that critical control point and actively monitoring that CCP. So it's now kind of real life that they're into being involved with that. Our fourth training moment of need is because we know we work in the food industry and we know that what can go wrong does go wrong occasionally, is that now we have to get into problem solving. So it's a case here looking at our CCP operator is that what this one is they need to know how to work and do corrective action in the case that the monitoring shows something has gone wrong, and now it's a case of, now what do I do? But we may have gone through that during the training at level 2, but now we're putting it into place. Okay, what is it that I have to do now because something's not doing what it's supposed to be? We've got a problem and I have to come up with a solution for that. I have to solve it. And then our fifth moment of training of need is changing how things are done, so that the way that we have done it and carrying on with the CCP operator is maybe we are changing that. In the past, it was a manual system that was done, and so when they had done the check, the monitoring check that was there, is that they manually recorded the results on a piece of paper. And so a change of how things are done is that a company may have decided that they want to be able to do trending, they want to put it into computer, and so now we've got a computerized type of recording that's there. And so the way that it's being done, the way that it's being carried out, the way that it's being handled is changing, and we have to provide training for the operator to be able to handle those changes. And we're going to talk about each of those 5 levels and some of the tips, the tools that we can provide, some of the support information that we can provide so that we have a very successful training program. When we look at these 5 levels, the first 2, the new, learning something new and then adding to that, learning something more, is really been is what we refer to as being our formal learning. This has been often classroom-based that's there. It's often face-to-face that's in place, and it's instructor-led. And this has really been, in a lot of cases, that it's very formal, and this is where our focus is. And I'm just going to address a question that's here. Yes, you will get a copy of these slides at the end of the webinar, so you don't need to write down furiously that's there. So very often our focus was on those first 2, and we didn't really think about applying it in real life. And so often what happened was we overloaded our training because we felt we had to get it all in. They had to know it all. But with the 5 moments of need, we can provide some of this information when it's going to be used. And so that's where the informal learning comes in. And so we've changed with the informal learning. Now that's more on the job that's there. It's self-learning. It may be peer learning, so learning from someone else that's in the peer. And so when we're looking at that training, we need to consider what it is that we can put into that informal learning so that they will know. And so I look at it that, when I first started training, I've been training for about the last 30 years, it used to be the need to know. What do people need to know? And so we put everything into that formal learning so that we knew that they had it. Today, it's really, we can have need to access, and that need to access is, where can they go on a computer? Where can they go onto an iPad to find out some of this information? And this came kind of clear to me. It wasn't a food safety incident, but it was something that I had a fender bender recently that somebody drove into the side of my car. And it was one of those things that I remembered from training, kind of that formal training and going through, is that there were a series of things that were supposed to, being able to contact, who do I contact? What do I do? It was sort of that initial one. And then I remembered, and this kind of comes into the informal learning, I remembered that I'd gotten an information card from my insurance company that went through the steps of what to do to report an accident that was in there. So kind of looking at that oftentimes that formal learning, yes, we've learned it, but when we actually go to put it in place, it's like, what did they talk about again? What did I need to do? So we're going to talk about some of the tools, some of the methods that we can use to support these different 5 levels of learning that are there. So as I said, new and kind of additional training were really our formal, what we've done. That historically these were classrooms, classroom face-to-face training that was in place, that was there. It was learning from an instructor that went through. Today we're looking at maybe some of the more self-studies, some e-learning that's in place, some blended learning. With those ones, what we have to think about when we're putting those in, especially if we're looking at new, is do we have the resources? For e-learning, we need computers. Do we have enough computers to be able to do this in a timely manner? Is it a case of we're going to have to teach somebody how to use a computer before they go through and to do the training? With self-study, what we have to look at there is if somebody's training themselves on how to do something, do they understand it? Are they able to interpret that correctly? A number of years ago, I did a self-study program to get my pest control license, the first level of my pest control license. The next year, I went and I took a classroom course. And I realized during the classroom course, during discussions from the instructor, that I had misunderstood some of the things when I had been going through the self-study. And so had to make them corrections. So it's something when we're looking at that new is that this is the foundation that we're going to be building on. We want to make sure that those tools that we've provided will actually give them the foundation. One of the ones that I really like with new is a blended learning. And in this case, what it is that we have the learner do some work before they come into our operation, that they go through, they get that, and then they have a face-to-face, they're into the classroom to allow them to have an opportunity to ask questions, perhaps correct some information that wasn't clear to them. The only issue with that one is that we have to make sure everyone does it. Otherwise, we end up in the classroom with people at different stages, which is a problem to go through. Probably our more training is one of the most that we're most comfortable with because this is really, we're building on familiarity that's here. And so with this one, we're adding to the previous knowledge. So it's just kind of looking and how do we add, make sure that there are changes that are there. This is one that, if I'm looking at that more, I may have done as part of the GMP some training with about sanitation practices, about GMP, about pest control as we're going on, and maybe we are elevating somebody to the sanitation program. Now we may bring in the supplier of our sanitation program, the suppliers of our pest control program, to be actually able to provide some additional training for these individuals beyond what we had given them at the beginning to go through. Okay. I want to focus now on really where one of the things is that informal learning. As I said, often our focus in our training programs was based on that new and that more, that very formal. And we didn't spend a lot of time, we didn't think about how this was going to be applied in the real world. And so I want to talk a little bit about this informal learning, how we apply it, if we've got a problem, how we solve it, and then change. And what's interesting is they've shown that about 75% of all of our workplace learning is done informally. Think about that. We've spent all of our time developing training programs, looking at those training programs for the formal, new, and more. But really, most of the learning that people have who are going to be applying this in the workforce, it's done on the job. And so this is really where we want to focus and maybe move some of our focus. And Bob Mosher, who was one of the people who came up with the 5 moments of training needs, said, what it is that it's not what people know. that's often our training programs are focused on their knowledge. It is what they can do with that information. And so think about with the training. So our previous learning provided the knowledge and the skills that we had. Now what we want to look at is how confident are people that they're going to carry it out. How confident are they? How confident are we that they're going to be able to do that? And when we look at, and today we hear more and more about people being competent. You know, we've stepped away when we think about GFSI, when we think about some different regulations. They've stepped away from saying the person is trained to the person is competent to carry out that work. And so now we need to look, because the competency comes into this particular level here. When we think about confidence and really with the knowledge of it's the confidence of being able to take that knowledge and put it into place. And there's three things that we look at. One is that we've provided somebody with the training, but they didn't really understand the training, and they're out there and they are working and they're misinformed. These are the ones who are making mistakes. They might have confidence that they can do something, but they didn't understand the training. So they're doing it wrong. Then we also have the people who have the knowledge, they've understood it, but they're not confident to put it in place. And so they're hesitant to work and to do it. And they may hesitate not going forward with doing something that they're supposed to because they're not sure that they're doing it correct. What we want to do is we want to bring that knowledge that we've provided before into alignment with confidence, so that now we've got somebody who's an expert at what they're doing. They've mastered the requirement and they're competent to do it. And so let's look at how we provide some of that confidence to go ahead. So some of the tools for that. So this is the apply. So this is where we're taking the information that was that they've learned, and now they're having to apply that information in real time. And things don't always work according to what they think should be. So things go wrong. And really what we're looking at here, that's a training, and we may not have thought about it being training, but it's a training tool for us, is how do we support their performance so that they're confident and moving forward with this. And so some of the things that we can have that we put in place are job aids. And I'm going to show a couple of those in just a second. There can be information that we've provided to them that going forward, it's the ones that I'm going to look at are kind of job aids, company internet, and documentation, because while coaching and lunch and learn are great ways of being able to support additional performance, one of the problems is that some of that where we need to apply that maybe at that 3 a.m. in the morning. We don't, and things go wrong. How do we make sure that we're doing it correct at that time? So that's really with looking at how does this person who's having to apply this new learning, what are some things that they can have? So some of the things that we have for on-the-job performance are those job aids. I realize probably, kind of hand washing somebody who may have had training. Okay, what was the steps again? With looking at probably more so with the person who is the CCP operator or going through, is that what are the reference documents that they can have, looking at short videos. We want things that they're able to access quickly and conveniently. And so online references that kind of offer some key information that they can access anytime, anywhere. So for example, if I'm supposed to be cleaning a piece of equipment and I forget how to dismantle a piece of equipment, I can look at something, or I can play a short video. And what I'm starting to see now is, like, a lot of companies, we're so lucky today that we have technology. And so one company, what they have is they have iPads at different workstations, and on the piece of equipment that's there's a QR code And so what it is that QR code, if somebody, wants information on how, again, how do I dismantle it? What are the key things that are there? They can use the iPad, scan the QR code, and information comes up. Oftentimes it's, some frequently asked questions to look at that, how do I work with that piece of equipment? All of those things that are really good practices for them. Some of the ones that some of you may have seen, we're starting to see them more in use in companies, is Google Glasses. NSF has iSucceed. And so what it is it's a pair of glasses that an employee can put on that with whatever the work that they're supposed to be doing and walking it through, they can see it comes up kind of on the glasses themselves so that they can look and make sure that they're following all the steps. Some companies looking at using virtual reality. Again, part of it is that before they go out and they work, because sometimes it may not be safe to work in the online environment, is that through virtual reality, they're able to be there, they're able to see what the practices should be. So looking at those are all some, kind of short, to the point, readily accessible, that if I have questions as I'm starting to apply this, it's available to me. So what that means is that somebody's not making it up as they go. We want consistency that's there. The next one when we have to look at this is that we may have problems. This is really when things go wrong. Again, because they've had training, but looking at that, do they recognize how that training fits into what they're going to do? I've heard this more recently from probably QA managers, so they may have a bit of a vested interest, but they're saying, supervisors don't really recognize food safety issues on the floor and or know how to fix them in the workplace, to go through, when something goes wrong, what is it that they need to do? And so that's really what the solve comes in. That's here. And I heard about one company, what they've done is they've sort of set up a private Facebook style program on their company intranet. And what it does is that on there, they have frequently asked questions, those FAQs, frequently asked questions that somebody can go in and look, because oftentimes, especially if we have multiple companies with, similar products, similar lines, something may have happened at another company, at a sister facility. And so they can go in and they can look and say, okay, has it happened someplace else? What did they do to solve that? It also allows them to do a lot of internal discussions that they can post. I'm having this issue at my facility, and they are able to get from peers in another company that's there. And so that's where it's looking at, how do I fix it? That's in place. So rather than having somebody go ahead and do what, something that may not be right just because they're solving it on their own case, is we've given them some tools to be able to do that. Our fifth moment of training need is our most challenging. And this is where we have to change a practice. And what this does is this is requiring a learner, they have to unlearn a concept and learn a new one. Often, and as adult learners, we resist change. We don't like change in a lot of cases. We have a lot of discomfort with this. And so this is really important to remember, that that discomfort is one of the most important things when you're applying this at this moment of need, this change. And what was interesting, I was at a conference yesterday, and one of the other speakers was addressing this this change and the speed with change. I think we probably all know that our change is happening much more frequently today than it ever has. And one of the speakers there had done a study, and they looked at it, that around 200 years ago, the speed of change was measured in 60 years. So between kind of technology changes and things, it was taking over 60 years for something to come about. And then to today, they looked at that it's less than 30 years. So it's half the time for making a technology change than it was previously. And that change, changes to go through. So now with that less than 30 years, for most of us, that means there's going to be a change, a significant, and not just a change, but a significant change to what we do within our lifetime, within our working lifetime. And so it's something that we have to consider when we are putting this training in place. And I'm going to focus a fair bit now on this one because it's the one that we have the most challenge. It's probably the area that we spend the least kind of time thinking about ahead of time. And I'm going to give you an example of one that was with change. And I'm not sure if I think I've met two people in my lifetime that look at Google Glasses is looking. I just did a quick scan of the chat there. This is a Dvorak Keyboard. Most of us use a QWERTY keyboard, and the reason it's called QWERTY is if you look in the upper left, the top 6 keys, there's QWERTY. They call it QWERTY. This is a Dvorak keyboard, and this was developed, I think, about 80 years ago now. And when it was developed, they looked at it that it would allow people to type faster. There were less errors they made, and there was less employee injury because there was less finger motion, so we didn't get that repetitive motion. I mean, great things to look at, and so I sort of wonder, well, why, if there is so much benefits to having this Dvorak keyboard, why are we all not using it? Well, part of it is that when we look at that change, is those benefits do not happen immediately, and that's really something that when we look at that change is that we may start to look at putting training in place to change something because we don't have an immediate improvement. Management, the individuals themselves often revert back to what we were doing before. And so what it is we want to make sure that when we are putting this change in place that we are recognizing that it's going to take time and commitment to making that change. To go forward. So it's making sure that we have that. The other thing is that when we look at that change, we want to make sure that we're providing the right training. And so for a company with this one is that, it might go back to that we know that we need to have better employee GMPs, better hygiene practices within a company, within our employees. And so we want to look, and so this was a study that was done a couple of years ago, and they looked at that 90% of companies provided food handler training. Don't ask me why, the other 10% didn't, but 90% of companies provided food handler training. And what they found is that only 11% of employees washed their hands properly. And it had been part of the training that had been delivered with the food handler training. They went on further and looked, and they found that of those companies, only 20% of those companies provided supervisor training. So additional training for them to go through and to understand, the proper way of washing hands, why it was necessary. And this is kind of one of those things of looking and saying, you know what, we want to make a change. We want to improve employee practices for hygiene. Maybe it's not sending everybody back through GMP training and teaching them how to wash their hands that they already know. Maybe it's a case of we need to provide supervisors with additional training so that they understand why, and they are really there, that they are enforcing and reinforcing the need for proper hand washing. And that's really key as we look at our, kind of as we've changed to GFSI standards and some different country regulations. So for example, FSMA that really focuses on supervisor competency, that, making sure that we're providing the right training to the right people. The even more concerning is that I was reading one study that showed, kind of not even providing supervisor training, but one study showed that over 60% of managers and supervisors actively didn't support the learners after they had gone for training. So really kind of giving them a different perspective that was there. So when we're thinking of change, we may need to always start at the top, make sure the people who are going to be supervising are on board with it. So when we look at change, we also have to look at when we should change. Are we training at the right time? I've been called in to do training. They've said, we're building the plant and we want you to train all the employees now. They're not going to be putting this practice into place later. So when we look at if we're training at the right time, we have to look at, what is it that we need to train? Well, who's the people that are training? What's the need at right now? And are they going to have a chance to practice that training? And this is some of you may be familiar with this. This is an Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, and Dr. Ebbinghaus was in the 1800s. He studied the science of memory, and what he did was he looked at from when people got information, how long was it that they before they forgot that information. And so this kind of goes along with, if you look at this, is that you can see with the black line that's there, is that what Dr. Ebbinghaus found is that, even as we were training and just, within the day of delivering that training, they had lost, kind of 50 to 60% until over, kind of at 6 days, they had forgotten almost 75 to 80% of what had been trained. So think about this. You've spent time going through delivering the training, and I'm sure you've probably had this instance where is that it's like, well, I trained them to do that. Why aren't they doing that? Well, part of it is they may have forgotten. What the gold line is there is that looked at, that there were studies, and Ebbinghaus looked at this, different universities since then have looked at this, is that they've looked at refreshers. And so they've looked and said, if within 48 hours, we spend about 10 minutes and we go through the key areas, the key things that we did in the training. This could be a shift huddle talk. At the beginning of a shift, at the beginning to go through, is that there's a huddle talk. We provide the supervisors with talking points to make sure the information's correct and it's consistent. To go through, and they just review the key points that had gone through. And you can see that the learning goes back up to almost 100%. They found that if we did that again at 5 days, that may be something that it might be a quiz that we do. It might be a fill in the blank that we do as part of going through. And then again at about 30 days that we look at and spend 2 to 4 minutes. That might be something that we have an electronic billboard that we just bring it back and we go through the key things. And you can see that it's gone back up. And at this point, it really stays very close to that 100%. And so what it is looking and saying, okay, when can I review it? When can I go through this? And so this is the thing, is that our, historical sort of one and done, looking at it that, we trained once and ticked the box to say that they'd had training, we'd gone through it. That's no longer acceptable as part of the training and going through. We now need to make sure that we're using every opportunity that we have as a training event to reinforce the information, making sure that people understood and bringing it back to the front of their memory. So when we're training, a few things to look at is making sure we're focusing on the why. to go through. Why that we're asking them to do this, especially with the change that's there. If we're changing something, why is it in place that we're asking them to do that? Focus on push versus pull. What this means is that what training do the learners need rather than just routine training. So, for example, with our HACCP team, if we're having to change something that's there and change what they're doing, what do they need to know? What do they need more information on validation rather than just going back and reviewing the 12 steps of HACCP with them again? What is it that they feel that they need that's in place, that's there? So having them pull the information from us rather than us pushing the information at them. And then the third thing is with this training is making sure, and I have to watch how this one is, it's encouraging mistakes. Basically what it is saying, does your training environment, is it allowing for safe failures? That's there. If you think back to when I talked about people being confident in what they need, in what they're doing, is that one of the things by allowing them to make mistakes, encouraging them to try, and that's kind of where that virtual reality comes in to go through, is that if they really part of building confidence is by learning what doesn't work and encouraging mistakes so that people get that practice in place. Okay, so I said that training at the moment of change, this is one that we've kind of been the least attended to, and yet it's the one that's really most challenging because we're having to make changes that are in place. And so it's often the one that is the most costly to us as well. So here's some best practices that we have. And so I'm just going to go through those practices. First off is making sure we're aligning those, the training that we're going to put in place. Does it meet the business need? If we're making a change, is this training going to help with that change? Or is it something that we maybe need some other resources? I was called in because a company wanted hand wash training. They said our employees aren't doing it correct. We're getting non-conformances, it was sort of to go through. We need to make a change or how they're doing that. Well, the thing is I found that they had 40 or 50 people who were returning from break and they had one hand wash sink. So we want to make sure that training, is it going to be understood? Are the behaviors that are there, are they going to solve the need? And so this, when we look at this is kind of when we might put some of those different training programs in place. And so when we look at change that we would have, it's often when we've got new pieces of equipment, we've got new procedures, we're building a food safety culture in place. So to be able to find out what, if it's worked or not, is one of the things we've done is online survey tools. So these are great things. Part of it is that they're anonymous. We may ask people, but do they feel confident to be able to tell us what it is that they don't know? And remember that person who's hesitant, maybe they've gone through training and they go, I don't want to tell you that I really don't know how to, do corrective action at the metal detector that's there. I don't know what I'm doing wrong that's in place. So this may be an online survey tool that allows us to, kind of before the training, back to that, allowing them to pull information from us. What are the things that they need? What are the things that aren't working for them? And then after the training, to be able to get, again, that anonymous feedback on the training, to be able to say, has it corrected the situation that we had in place? The next one, and this is one that I really want to stress, is set the learning expectations before training begins. If you're sending someone out for training, let them know why. Make sure they understand and agree that kind of performance expectations from that. If you're sending somebody out for training, let's say you're sending them to an off-site HACCP training course, they're going to be that HACCP, moving on to the HACCP team, a bit of the more that's there, is that you let them know that when they come back, you're going to expect them, to help you put the HACCP program in place. I do a lot of public training, and it's always surprising to me that when we go through and we're doing introductions and I ask someone why they're there, they'll go, I have no idea. My boss just told me I had to come. They're not getting what they need to get out of that training program. I mean, they'll get something to take back, but if you've set the expectations ahead of time, this is what we're expecting you to do, they're going to be more involved, going to be more engaged. Commit to the training. And I know this is difficult to go through, is that it's going to take time. Think back to the Dvorak Keyboard. They hadn't committed to the training. They hadn't committed to that change to go through. And so with if somebody's we're making a change to what we do, people are having to unlearn what they did previously, relearn a new thing. We may need to bring in additional people. We may need to reassign some duties to allow them a chance to practice, allow them a chance to practice right away. And I saw this myself. I went to a training program on using Excel. I mean, I know how to use Excel, but the trainer took us through all of these great ways of looking at trending and how to do graphing and things like that. And I thought, oh my gosh, I can use so much of this in my job. But what happened is that I took the training and then I went off site for about 2 weeks to deliver other training. By the time I came back, it was a case of when I sat down to do stuff and thought, oh yeah, there were all those great things that I learned from the Excel. I'd forgotten a lot of it. And because my reports had to be in, I reverted back to what I had always done, and I continued to do that. And so it's really looking at, making training that priority in place. So that's really kind of looking at this one is creating those opportunities for practice as often as possible. We've got that, thinking about that Ebbinghaus forgetting curve that's there. Are we giving them a chance to practice in place? Are we going back and reviewing it? Some of the passive things that we've done, that kind of historically we looked at were posters and symbols that we had. With here, yeah, they work, but part of it is that we have to make sure we're changing them. And I know of some companies, what they have done is they've purchased a poster service that, kind of once a week or once a month a new poster sent in. Well, sometimes the information that's on that poster wasn't consistent with what the company the expectations for. So it was kind of confusing to people that was there. So it's making sure that that they're being changed out often enough and that they're consistent with the message that you want. A more active one is booster learning. We at NSF have used one called Mind Marker. That what it does is that, again, back to that Ebbinghaus of memory, is that it allows us over time, after the training, to send out either to somebody's phone or to their iPad or computer that's there. It's a number of ways, and we're able to ask questions. So we're able to put some questions in that were part of the training. So you can see that one that's asked, best way to motivate an employee. What was it that we learned in the training program? What this is what I love is not just that they've learned the information, but how have they applied it, is that part of it allowed us to do some surveys. So what it was is we challenged the learners to, when they were going in, ask them to write in, because they could type back in what had they done differently from the learning. So it was really a way of being able to look and see if there had been an employee behavior change as well. So that was something, and with those ones, they went on for about 3 months. With the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, we looked at the 30 days, the 1 month. This was something that we've looked at for 3 months, and it's a great tool to look at. And so when we've got phones and iPads and things like that people have, it's a number of different ways of being able to reinforce that learning, bringing it back to mind. And then kind of final is making sure, especially if we're changing, that we're rewarding our teams, we're rewarding people for successful performance in place. That oftentimes what happens is we've set expectations of what the performance is going to be. As people do it, we don't recognize that that it's been work. They've had to make these changes. And so this one, Ty, looking at it, that rewarding, that if that's kind of the carrot and that's supposed to be a stick in underneath there. And so oftentimes what happens with change is some of the cases of that people don't make the change is because they're not motivated. They know that there's no consequences if they don't make the change or if they're not doing it. That's there. So it's really key. Part of it is that, and you can see there that positive reinforcement is better than negative by a 4-to-1. One thing that I had one person say to me is one of the things that she does is she had coffee coupons that she had, and so that as because they were making a number of changes within their facility, is that what she had done was when she saw somebody doing it right, and we talk about that, catching somebody doing it right. Very often we're so focused on catching somebody doing it wrong, but she was catching somebody doing it right to the new practice. They got a coffee coupon. So it was kind of, other people saw it, wanted a coffee coupon. They started to do things right as well. The stick is that if they're not doing it, are there consequences? And I think this is one of the reasons why sometimes change doesn't happen, is because, as I said, people don't realize there's no consequences. They don't realize there's consequences, or those consequences aren't equally distributed across. So if are people meeting our expectations? If they're not, if we're not going to do anything about it, they're going to just revert back to what they were doing before. So we have to think about those consequences. They're communicated to people when we are looking at what's there and getting them to move forward. And so thinking of just kind of finishing off that with this one is food safety. Our training's never finished. I'm sure a number of you, if not all of you, recognize Deming's PDCA cycle. We use this in training as well. Our training plan. So thinking about the five moments of need, not just the first two, but thinking about how are we going to apply it? How do we look and make sure that the solving and the change that's there, looking at what training needs to be done, delivering that training, and then checking. How do we know that how do we know that the behavior has changed that's there? Are people motivated, or have they reverted back to what they were doing before? And when I talk about that checking, that assessment, go beyond a quiz. Very often we deliver a quiz at the end of the training program. People pass it and we think we're good. And then we find out that there are problems. So looking at that check. And then once we have that, go through and enact and improve it. We want to review our training programs, go back again to the competencies that we had developed, the competencies that we said. We know that practices drop off over time. Other kind of priorities may come in, or it may be that operators have come up with a better method. So we need to go back and review and see, are things still being done? Is the training still working? Verify it. Has it achieved what we want? Has behavior changed? Are they doing what's there? Challenge it. During kind of thinking of internal audits, ask questions, observe, asking employees why they're doing. Remember, we said that important, that why that was there, that they're not just doing it by rote, but why are they doing that training? And then bring all of that information together to improve your training program. So it is something that is achieving what you want. It's meeting company requirements that's there, and you're getting payback with employees that are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And with that, I thank you very much, and I'm going to turn it back over to Simon for that.
Yeah. Okay, Jen, if you can switch your webcam on, and we'll take some questions. Thanks very much for that. Lots of discussion and questions you probably saw in the sidebar.
Okay, but I'll leave it up to you. And if there's some questions that maybe don't get answered, I might be able to provide them later. Okay.
Okay, so Judith is saying, asking, do you not think that one of the main problems in current training and where we need to change is to provide personnel, supervisors and managers with some really good reasons and understanding of the potential consequences if controls are not implemented?
Oh, definitely, Judith. That's the why behind it. Like if we're not doing, what could happen if we're not in place? And so it's bringing that in of what, kind of what's happened to other companies, looking at that and bringing in some newspaper articles. I love that when we go through is that because if people don't think that there are consequences for them, but consequences for the company as well, they may not follow through.
Okay, very important. And Anna, you covered this, I think, but just to expand on it maybe, how would you evaluate the effectiveness of training? I've seen quiz evaluations, on-site shadowing. Are there any other methods?
Really, probably on-site shadowing is probably the best one. I mean, are people able to do what we want them to do? Some of the ones that I've seen is that go beyond is using case studies that they have. So some examples and how would they correct that situation. It has been looking at questioning that's there. Yeah, fill in the blanks. To go through that go beyond just the quiz, because what happens often with the quiz is people just give us back what they had. So it's looking at that questioning, interviewing them.
Okay, Amit, some GFSI-based programs are requiring companies to have an employee accountability program to show GMP violations may lead to disciplinary action. How can we change the carrot and stick mentality when standards require it?
I'm not sure that with looking at that, I'm not sure that I would agree that they require it. I think what it is what they're requiring is that if somebody's not doing what they're supposed to be doing, is that there are consequences. So with that one is that, they've sort of focused on the second part of it, is that if we can have that carrot, so forth, and so that people aren't doing things wrong, it is working for us. It's more a case of, I think what some of the GFSI programs are looking at is that they recognize that people do things wrong and there is no negative impact on it. So I'm not sure we need to change the carrot and the stick mentality. I think it's just looking at that we make sure that we are having that negative consequence if necessary.
Yeah, and as you said, I think the carrot, is it 4-to-1 more effective? Yes. So reinforcing positive behavior. Yeah,
exactly. That's it. Is that recognizing too often what we do is we focus, and I love somebody had said this to me, we focus on catching people doing things wrong. Let's catch them and reinforce when things are being done right. That's really what food safety culture is about.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, my son, I know it's just, he did a chemistry test yesterday, and it's a very complex subject, and he doesn't like it. So I've been helping him revise, and he said to me after, I said, "How did it go?" And he said, "Oh, the first bit I didn't revise, but I didn't." So I actually said, it doesn't matter, son. It's all just helping you learn. I said, "I'm proud of you anyway, son." And that actually came to my mind when you put that slide up, actually, because that will actually probably motivate me more than be telling him if I was to tell him off or something like that.
Well, it is, and oftentimes when people talk about reward for doing things right, oftentimes we switch right to, oh, well, we can't afford to pay them anything more. But one company, I didn't get into this, one company, what they do is they've got a large employee parking lot. The employee that has the best improvement of their behavior gets to park next to the door. So, I mean, it costs them nothing. They get kind of the employee of the month to go through there. So
quick getaway.
Quick getaway.
Oswaldo, it is important both the validation of the training process and its effectiveness in training. Is there a suggested method? I think
I'm
we
not
discussed
quite
that.
Sure what that. I think when we think in terms of validation, validation kind of is it effective to go through? I think what it is, and a suggested method, I think what I would suggest, and I didn't talk about it during the talk, is that often our training should be to solve a need. So we should be measuring before we start the training to find out what the current state is, like how, is it a case of somebody's not filling out the paperwork? So what's the current state that's there? And then deliver the training and then go back and measure again. Very often we try and measure after the fact, but we don't have any baseline to go with. And so I think in terms of being able to look at that effectiveness, where did we start from? We delivered the training. Has it achieved the behavior that we needed? And when we find out that it hasn't achieved the behavior, oftentimes what it means to me is that training was maybe not the answer. There was something else that was the situation, or as I say, that we were delivering training to the wrong group. We delivered training to the frontline employees, but really what it should have been was training being delivered to the supervisors.
Mm. They are key, aren't they? These supervisors.
They are.
Yeah. Tiffany, does food safety culture have an effect on training outcomes, language barriers and culture barriers on personal and business related?
Training, well, food safety culture, I think with that one is that, let me see how I'm going to, I think perhaps the impact is the other way around, is that our training, our language hasn't, being able to put a better training program in place, people recognizing that they're being trained to go through, has a positive impact on our food safety culture. I'm doing some training right now with that we're doing internationally with a company, and part of it is that it's all about food safety culture that is there, and how the impact of making sure that employees who are properly trained, properly being supervised, that the management is giving them the right message, is really looking at improving. They're improving their company culture that's in place. So I think I'm going to turn that one around, that there is an effect.
Sense. Yeah, makes sense. Mohammed's asking for a form or template for training needs assessment, but we probably haven't got one. But could you sort of give a bit of guidance on what could be on such a form?
Oh, there's some different ones. One is that, and I've done some surveys with this, is looking at, if we had, and this was kind of coming back to see what was most important, is that it was a list of 10 things that we were training on, 10 things that we were thinking about training on. And this was when I was working in industry, not with NSF. And so what I had on, and I had two measurements, a measurement of 1 to 5 on each side. And one was, how important is this to my job? And how confident am I in achieving this? And so it might be, being able to, if part of my job as a maintenance person was dismantling equipment, how important was learning about dismantling equipment to that particular job function, and how confident was I in that I was achieving it. And so it allowed us, because we didn't want to do things that weren't important to their job, because training resources, we didn't have unlimited resources. We wanted to be able to train them on things that were important to their job, but also if they felt that they didn't have a good understanding of it. We wanted things that were important and things that they needed training on to deliver that training to. And so that's one of the things that with that needs assessment, there's other ones that are maybe a bit more informal, is that from an informal standpoint, I'll ask, what are people not doing now that they need to do?
Yeah.
What will a successful training program, how do we know, what are we going to use to measure to make sure that we've achieved the change in the behavior? What are the incidents that if we had the proper training, we might not have had that incident? So it can be a series of questions.
Yeah. Could internal audits be, the outcomes
Definitely.
of internal audits be?
Definitely.
Yeah.
To go through and to look at.
Okay. Oswaldo, I think he's asking, can you use lessons learned in training?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. That's one of the best ways, is that, this is what happened when we did it that way. One of the things, is I just caution when we're using that, is be cautious of not pointing the finger at somebody within your organization. So sometimes I had one company that did some training, and what they did was they said, we're doing this because Joe did that. And so this is why we're doing the training, is to improve what had gone wrong before. So definitely that's awesome.
Okay. Just a couple more questions we'll take, and then we'll have to leave it. Nikki, it's quite an interesting, what about sort of some best practice to document those quick, informal, maybe corrective training during production, non-classroom type training?
And that's key, Nikki, that kind of comes into that Ebbinghaus, that, with that 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 to 4 minutes that was there. We find that I'm just going to step back, is that I'm going to use an example from one organization. What they had done, because we want to make sure there's consistency, if we've got different supervisors delivering part of that training as part of their shift, during production, what was done was they put together 1-point lessons. So it was information for the supervisors so that they knew what they were going to be talking about. They were provided with the why that it was important that was there, and kind of talking points. It was easy enough for them to be able to look at, kind of, because they had, because it was done on shift, we had the shift records of who had been there and what had been covered to go through. But it's important to capture that when we do that sort of more informal training, is that you're capturing who was there, how much time was spent on it, and kind of key areas that were covered, so that you can use that to be able to show as part of your GFSI or part of your own continuous improvement. We just didn't do, kind of the half-day classroom training, but here's all the additional work that we put into it as well.
Yeah. Okay, last one. Again, about supervisors from Samuel. What suggestion when supervisors are not following up the employees' training? How about some training, supervisor training?
Part of it is that, and again, I'm going to use a personal example here, is that I recently went in to deliver training for a company that this was kind of one of the issues that they were dealing with. And what I found is that the supervisors didn't have the confidence to know why something was wrong. So that when they were challenged, so if they were following up with the employees doing something wrong and they were challenged by the employee, the supervisor wasn't really confident in why it was necessary. Remember, we have that why. And so really what we turned that whole training program in with those supervisors was, okay, here's the GMP hand washing. And then we went through kind of why it was necessary. We had the practices looking at, for them, some more in-depth on microorganism pathogens, how they spread, what was in place. So we were providing additional training for the supervisors so that they were able to go back and have that information to be able to justify why those GMPs were necessary. So that may be something that if they're not following up is a case of kind of confidence on the part of the supervisor as to they may not understand why those GMPs are in place.
Yeah, I mean, there could be other reasons, lots of other reasons why they're not following up, but obviously understanding a deeper knowledge and et cetera, and being able to explain why and be confident is key. Right. Thanks very much, Jen. Much appreciated. We've gone over as usual, but it's not a problem.
I thought I might finish on time this time, but
no chance. I mean, I was surprised when we chatted earlier that you didn't do a Food Safety Friday last year, and this is the first one this year. Time flies, but hopefully you'll be back next year. So thanks very much, Jen.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thanks a lot.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, that's Jennifer McCreary from NSF International. All that there is to do now is to issue your certificate of attendance, which is in the sidebar. So you go over to Dropbox, download that, and type your name or sign it, print and sign it. That's it. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. It's been a pleasure hosting this for you today, as always. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care, everyone.